Thank you. You may be seated. We're running just a few minutes behind, but that's fine. We'll get caught up. I want to acknowledge a few people before we begin the formal part of our program. The Office of Provost and Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs, Office of Enrollment Management and Student Affairs, the Department of Military Science, Instructional Media and Special Events, and the pocket U.S. Constitutions that are on the registration table are courtesy of our Congressman, Mike Rogers, who is also a JSU alum. So if you did not pick up one of those, please feel free to do so. And also, students in your seats, you have a survey to complete, and we ask that you complete this after the program concludes today. We'll have a basket at the door for you to place your survey in. We have to assess everything, and we assess this program too, and we appreciate feedback from you. So if you would help us out with that, we would appreciate it. At this time, I would like to introduce our new president, Dr. John Beeler, and we're very happy to have him with us on this Constitution Day.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be here with you today on this special day. It's a day when we celebrate our Constitution and celebrate citizenship. And it's important that while you're all here as students, that you learn not only how to become ethical and competent professionals, but you learn as well how to become responsible citizens. It's important that we all exercise our right to vote and participate in the political process. Too many people don't, and I think that's one of the things that I think we could improve in the country is getting more people involved, because really now, as in other times in our history, we're at a turning point where we really need to have some changes made and make sure that we're moving in the right direction as a nation and understand our role in the world. So it's really important that you celebrate this day, because as you know, the Constitution is the foundation of our entire government and our whole way of life, where we really espouse freedom and liberty for all. And so it's a great day to have all our speakers here and to be able to discuss all the important things that relate to citizenship. So welcome on behalf of the university, and I hope you enjoy the program, and I hope you enjoy the day, and I hope you do participate in the political process, because it's important that we really elect the right folks who are going to do the right job and move the country in the right direction, and folks who are not centered on themselves, but rather centered on the good of all of us as citizens. So welcome and have a great day. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Joe DeLapp, Vice Provost and Dean of Graduate Studies here at JSU. At this time, I'd like to introduce our American Democracy Project team. As I name each team member, if you could please stand and remain standing until we've recognized every team member. Dr. Benji Blair from Biology. Dr. Lori Owens, Political Science and Honors Program. Dr. Teresa Reed from English. Dr. Aaron Ryder from Sociology. Ms. Becca Turner from Career Services, and Mr. Carlos Acosta, our graduate assistant and MPA student for the American Democracy Project. They're in the back. I see him. Let's give them all a round of applause. And now Mr. Tyler Brown and Ms. Tia Pendleton will introduce our guest speakers.
Dr. William Harbour. Dr. Harbour is a native of Piedmont, Alabama. Upon entering Tennessee State University, Dr. Harbour joined the Student Central Committee of Nashville Christian Leadership Council. He participated in sit-ins, stand-ins, picket lines, marches, and was arrested several times throughout the Nashville area. After violence ended the Congress of Racial Equality Freedom Ride, Dr. Harbour was among the first group that continued the Freedom Ride that left Nashville, Tennessee. While in Alabama, Dr. Harbour was arrested in Birmingham, beaten in Montgomery, and alongside Dr. King and other students, was rescued by the National Guard at the First Baptist Church in Montgomery. Dr. Harbour was not deterred and continued to ride and was arrested in Jackson, Mississippi, and spent 49 days in the Parchman prison. While in prison, he was expelled from Tennessee State University, but through legal action was reinstated at TSU to continue his education. In 1964, he received his bachelor's degree from TSU, and in 1973, he received a Master of Science from the degree from the University of Utah. For 15 years, Dr. Harbour was selected to serve on President Johnson's Great Society program, War on Poverty, and in 1998, he retired to Atlanta, Georgia. On April 25, 2008, the Tennessee Board of Regents unanimously voted to grant the awarding of honorary doctorate of humane letters to the 14 expelled students in 1961. Dr. Harbour serves as a co-chair of the Freedom Riders Park Development Committee. That is Dr. William Harbour.
Mrs. Georgia Underwood Calhoun. Mrs. Calhoun is the founder of the Black Heritage Festival at the Anniston Museum of Natural History, one of the oldest and longest running Black Heritage festivals in the region. Mrs. Georgia Calhoun also serves as a member of the Freedom Riders Park Development Committee. Mrs. Calhoun received her Bachelor of Science in English from Alabama State University and her Master's of Arts in Elementary Education from Jacksonville State University. As an educator, Mrs. Calhoun has taught in elementary and secondary education throughout the southeastern region. Mrs. Calhoun has served as Vice Chairperson of the Alabama Historical Commission, Black Heritage Council, Board of Directors of Arts and Humanities at Auburn University, Chairperson for the Board of Directors at the Anniston Museum of Natural History, President of the Choccolocco Heritage Society, and is a member of Preserve Alabama, a branch of the Alabama Historical Commission. Among her many accolades, Mrs. Calhoun was awarded the 1999 Alabama Distinguished Civilian Award, 2001 Volunteer of the Year Award from the Retired Teacher Association, the 2004 The Quill Woman of Excellence Award, and in 2008, the Woman on the Move Award from the Alabama State Women's Auxiliary. Mrs. Calhoun is a member of New Prospect Baptist Church, the Alabama Poverty Board, the NAACP, Phi Delta Kappa, Jacksonville, and the Jacksonville State University Alumni Association. This is Miss Georgia Underwood Calhoun.
Mr. Peter Conroy. Mr. Conroy serves as the director of Jacksonville State University's Environmental Policy and Information Center. He is co-chair of the Freedom Riders Park Committee and the chair of the Northeast Alabama Entertainment Initiative. Born in Pennsylvania, Mr. Conroy moved to Asheville, North Carolina with his family in 1970. He has a Bachelor of Science in Biology from Furman University and a Master of Science in Zoology from the University of Georgia. He has worked as the curator for the Anniston Museum of Natural History and serves as the president of the Alabama Conservancy. Mr. Conroy was appointed by President Bill Clinton to serve as the Federal Commission of the ACT and ACF Tri-State Water Compacts, and Mr. Conroy retained this position under President George W. Bush until 2002. Mr. Conroy leads a number of projects related to conservation, hospitality, sustainability, health, and economic development. Among these projects are the Little River Canyon Center, Chief Ladiga Rail Trail, Music at McClellan, the Coldwater Mountain Preserve, and the reuse of Fort McClellan. Among his many passions are the promotion of green construction, education, civil rights, arts, technology, and ecotourism. Mr. Peter Conroy.
We have chairs.
Tony, you gonna run the film?
Freedom Riders Park, you know, a lot of people think that it's about history, but for us as a city, it's about the future. This falls directly in line with our strategic planning process. And we really want to make sure that future generations, not only locally, but internationally, know the story of the city of Anniston, how we've come back from the burning bus to the model city again.
Many of us remember the burning bus, but more don't. It's an important part of history. It's a chapter with information that provides answers to questions that a lot of us continue to have. It's a piece of a puzzle. So irrespective of what happens from this point forward, of course, now with Alabama Power's support and the support of so many others, we feel like the train's moving. It has already got a sign out there, so it is already a point of interest. Even with a plywood sign and a couple of 4x4 posts, which have been burned twice by folks who aren't so wild about the idea, we have already carved out Freedom Riders Park.
We're more so excited about people coming in and getting that historical experience. I love the quote by Marcus Garvey, people without their history is like a tree without their roots. So definitely we want people to come here, get rooted, really experience the local community as well. We always say that community is nothing but common unity. And we found a common ground as a city, as a county, and we really want people to come in and experience that historical experience and also be able to meet some of the people and visit our downtown as well.
Good morning to Dr. Bila and to all who are members of this Democratic Project, American Democratic Project. I'm honored to be here, and I thank you for the opportunity. And what I may say to you today is not what I have read, but most of it I have lived. I'm closer to 100 than I am anything else.
In a minute now.
Freedom Riders. Why Freedom Riders? We accept circumstances, or we adapt ourselves to circumstances, but we never yield to them. We never let them control us. Now, Freedom Riders just didn't come about because you needed somebody to ride a bus. That was a reason. Let's go back, and I can't, Pete has given me 15 minutes, so I can't go in 15 minutes where I really would like to take you. But okay, slavery was first. It was bad enough. But then the slaves knew a cabin, a mansion, a house, and a field. And then when January 1863, when President Lincoln did the Emancipation Proclamation and freed the slaves, they were not really free. Now, and everybody wasn't freed at the same time, because remember, the people in Texas didn't get the message till 6 months later. So you now you used to all this technology that they didn't have then, you know. Didn't have it when I was up here doing my student teaching. So after the emancipation, then came Jim Crow. I was born in the Jim Crow days. I lived through. I couldn't come to this school because of Jim Crow. I had to go other places. But that was so that brought us up to what you could do, what you couldn't do. We were restricted to the colored restrooms, the colored water. We were colored at that time. We have been colored, Black, Afro-American. I think we're Blacks now. Okay. But So there was a reason to have what? Freedom Riders. It was a catalyst for what? A change. You were being restricted where you could go and what you could do. I've been there. You will not believe some of the things I have been through. But everything that happens to you, I want to tell you students, is to make you stronger, and it's not to break you. Not to break you. You don't give up. You keep fighting. So in 1947, CORE, that was Congress of Racial Equality, started by James Former. And that they did a reconciliation study of what the courts had said that segregation must end in the South. So they needed to test that law. Now, so they gathered students up to do this, but they didn't just gather students and just say, go get on the bus. They gathered the students and they trained them because they knew what they were going to run into. You're going to run into all this hostility that you can't be here. You're not supposed to be here. So they were trained for nonviolence. Don't fight back. You just do what you're supposed to do. And there was 7 whites, 7 blacks, and 6 whites. It was 13 of them in all. And they were trained very well. And I want you to know, in this civil rights struggle, it has not been all black people. You must give credit. There were plenty of white people, and the American Jews was all on board. And so they trained these people, and I want you to know now, the buses were not a chartered bus. They didn't go say, we're just gonna get a bus there. It was the Greyhound bus, and it was the Trailway bus. And I'm not gonna tread on Bill's part, but I have to tell you that on this bus, on these buses, when they decided to go and ride, they put on the first bus, there was he was trying to think of his name, but anyway, he was there to not just guard the riders, but he was there to see that, really he was there being nosy. He was trying to see what was going on. I think Patterson was the governor at that time. And so he was put on the bus, and he got on the Greyhound bus, all right, with the students. The Trailway bus, there was also undercover people there. Now, these buses came from Washington, and I think the first hostility that they met was in Rock Hill, North Carolina. That was the first hostility, and that's where Congressman John Lewis, was beaten severely because he went into a restaurant there. There was no other trouble. They had maybe some little things happen to them until they got to Anniston. And Bill's going to tell you about that, but there were Gurney Avenue is where the bus station is located, was located. 1 block from the police station, where over 200 people had gathered there with bricks and bats and guns. The Trailway bus station came in about an hour later. It was on 9th Street. We still have one of our Freedom Riders who comes with us, Pearson. Mm-hmm. And Thomas was on the Greyhound bus. Thomas was on the Greyhound bus. And he was the one that was beaten so badly. Not beaten. He was blown out of the bus. Now, at the bus station, these rowdy people, let me tell you what the climate was in Anniston. We had on the steps of the courthouse, however, these don't ring, J.B. Stoner, and there was Lester Maddox, and all of the folk from out of Webb, the Adam brothers from out in Webb, where you couldn't even stop. You couldn't buy gas, you know. You couldn't buy gas. Black people couldn't buy gas at their service stations. That was the climate that was in Anniston. Now, this was Mother's Day. Where were the people? You know, some people are what we call CMEs. They come to church on Christmas, Mother's Day, and Sunday, and Easter. That's the only time they come. So they were at church with their beautiful hats and everything, and thinking about where they're going to go to dinner afterwards and everything. And nobody was thinking about somebody burning a bus. They weren't even thinking about the riders that was coming in on the bus. But the police and the Ku Klux Klans were very ready. They were thinking about it. Now, when they get to the bus station,
You pass your time. Go ahead. Just go ahead.
when they get to the bus station, the station master, he was scared to death. He called the police. No policeman came, but all of this mob was there. So he closed the bus station and went home, but he came back to watch. Now, so they couldn't get the people out of the bus. They were so rowdy and everything. So they slashed the tires and they followed the bus to where the burning kept. Now, the people on the Trailway bus didn't know what was going on because that's down on 9th Street. And if you have been to Anniston lately, we have murals of those buses where you could go see. It was on 9th Street, so they didn't know what was going on. Now, Charles Pearson was on that bus. And then we had, let me see, that was Jim Peck was a white man on the bus. There were several whites. They beat him worse than they did the blacks because they said he was a traitor. So he was beaten severely. Neither bus knew what was going on. The Greyhound, the Trailway, after beating and dragging all the people back, the mob got on the bus at the Trailway station and beat them and carried them all to the back, and just, the bus went on to Birmingham. Now, the Greyhound bus staggered and made its way out to 202. And that's where the bomb was thrown into the bus. The person who was on there, the patrolman who was on the bus, wedged the door, understand, with his body. And that kept the mob from getting into the bus. So then the mob threw the bomb in the bus, and that's what blew Hank Thomas out of the bus. And this is where you come in with Janie Forsythe, the little white girl who came and brought a glass of water at a time to give to these people who were suffering out there on the ground. They wouldn't let them go to the hospital. Some of them did make it to the hospital, and the hospital wouldn't serve them. The hospital couldn't serve them because the Klan said, if you let them in there, we're going to blow you up. So that was the climate. That was why the Freedom Riders not only freed people of color, they freed you too. They freed everybody. Because we couldn't be together in here today. if it had not been for the Freedom Riders. You couldn't have but one color on this campus if it wasn't for the Freedom Riders. Bill couldn't go to Jacksonville State. I couldn't come to Jacksonville State. So the Freedom Riders, we have to thank for being the people that they were. So you don't accept the circumstances, but you work through it and you work beyond it. And you don't let circumstances stop you, young folks. Don't care what you run into, there's a brighter day. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for taking all of my time. I appreciate that. Started to call Dr. Owen and say 15 minutes won't work. So we're here today. Thank you, George. Appreciate it. 1960, I graduated from high school in Piedmont, Alabama. That's my neighbor, Ralph Burton is here. And I applied for Jacksonville State University. My application was returned to my father and said, I started to say black, I don't know what happened. But anyway, your color cannot come down here. It was not integrated. That was 1960. Since that time, a brother and a sister, cousins, sister-in-law, all of them finished Jacksonville State University, which is 50-something years ago. So we can see the changes that's been made. The Freedom Riders start in Washington, D.C., and Georgia said, to test the system. So the Supreme Court had already said that at that time, they're saying coloreds and whites could ride the same seat of the bus. During 50 years ago, 55 years ago, it was white waiting room and colored waiting room. And blacks could not, coloreds could not go in the white waiting room. So the bus, as Georgia said, did have a little problem until it got to Anniston, Alabama. One of the things we want to do and what we're working on now in Anniston is the Freedom Riders Park, which is out on 202. Pete gonna talk about the progress we're making on that. But we want to make sure that young people coming through Anniston can see something that happened, see what a good part of what Anniston look like now. Anyway, I was one of the students in Nashville, Tennessee, 19 years old. I'd been in jail 10 times on the demonstrations for sit-ins and trying to integrate the movie theaters and swimming pools and so forth. So when the Freedom Ride was stopped in Birmingham, Alabama, we had already been trained and we were ready to take up the ride. We felt like if we let the Klan stop the Freedom Ride, then our whole progress would have been in trouble. So we volunteered to continue the Freedom Ride. I was at Tennessee State University, as I said, 19 years old, and we had over 500 people volunteer to catch the bus to come to Birmingham. We left 3 days later and got to the city limits of Birmingham, was met by Bull Connor, who used to be the mean sheriff. I see some people shaking their head, older folks. And he stopped the bus and gave us the good old boy thing that we should go back to Tennessee and Nashville and stop causing trouble. Eventually, he let the bus go into the bus station from the city limits. And they put newspaper on the bus windows so nobody could see us in the bus. Eventually, he said, well, we're gonna let you out if you go into the colored waiting room. We agreed and went immediately into the white-only waiting room. Stayed there half of the night, and he put us in jail, said for our own protection. Stayed in jail 2 days, and about 12 o'clock one night, he came in and took us out and took us back to the Alabama and Tennessee line, put us out on the railroad track early in the morning, 6 o'clock. We knew that, we just knew that somebody was following us, Klan, and we didn't know what it was going to do. Congressman John Lewis, who was a student at that time from Nashville, Tennessee, and I walked down the railroad track, And back 50 years ago, said black folks lived across the railroad track in little small shanty houses and so forth. And we knocked on the door, and the lady came to the door and said, a man came to the door first, and he said, "You're all Freedom Riders, you can't come in here." So a lady, Catherine Burke from Birmingham, she was one of the students. She said, "Hit the door real hard and wake up his wife. You know, she'll make the final decision." So we hit the door, and she came to the door, and she said, "Y'all children's come on in." We stayed there and called and got 2 cars from Nashville, Tennessee. And we decided, I was waiting on the car, to return back to Birmingham. They did not have a bus driver. He said, "We're not going to give our life for NAACP, Snake Corps, or nothing else." Eventually, 2 days later, a bus driver came in, and as you know, we didn't have black bus drivers at that time, all white, and took us to Montgomery. When we left the station, we had a helicopter on top, flying on top of the bus. We had 5 state troopers in the front. We had every 5 miles down the highway, they had a state trooper stopped on the side of the road. Eventually, we got to Montgomery, and all the protection left. Everybody left. Didn't see nothing. Pulled into the bus station in less than 15 minutes. Blood ran down the street. They had axe hounds. They had bats. They had everything, and beat us real bad. About 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, 30 minutes later, the policeman showed up and stopped the crowd. That night, we got in touch with Dr. King, and he came in the next morning and was going to hold a mass meeting. Mass meeting started about 7 o'clock, and the crowd started gathering. They turned over cars out front and tried to set the church on fire. Immediately, Dr. King was on the phone with the Kennedy brothers, and they sent in the National Guard. And that's the only way we got out of the church, because they had planned to burn the church down. The next day, we made another major decision to go into Jackson, Mississippi. Immediately in the Jackson, Mississippi, they met us, and we got to the bus station, walked off the bus, and immediately arrested. Next morning, we were charged with $200 fine or 6 to 7 days in jail. We refused to pay the fine, and they took us to prison. So many students came in at that time, did not have room for everybody. Over nearly 400 students and also adults went to prison in Mississippi in 1961. Out of that, 50% was white and 50% was black. We don't know how it happened that way, but it just happened that way. 50% of the students was white and 50% was black. Students came from 38 states and 6 foreign countries. That's the other reason why we want to do a park, so the Freedom Riders from foreign countries and everywhere else can see what happened on the Freedom Ride in Anniston, Alabama. Let me know when I get on your part. Appreciate Jacksonville State for all the parts you all are playing now, Mr. President. And thank you, Ms. Owen, for inviting me. And so my dear friend of mine, Dr. Brady is here. We've been friends for years and years. And also a friend of my brother's. I agree with the president that we got to, and students have to vote and do something to help change this world. It's amazing, you just can't believe. My son asks me all the time, say, "Well, how do y'all take that?" But it was a day that we don't want to go back to. We feel like the Freedom Ride and the Freedom Riders changed this world and changed this country. Out of all the things that have happened throughout the sit-ins and demonstrations and everything else, we feel that the Freedom Riders and the part that was played in Anniston, Alabama, helped change this country. And we definitely want to make sure that that's known for students, high school students, and everybody that travel. I talked about, I was here about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I talked about the economic part that's going to play in this city. People are going to be coming through here all the time. Buses are going to come. Even now, I was here one Sunday afternoon, and a bus came through with students going to traveling for the summer. I called Pete one Sunday morning, Pete, can you meet a bus that's coming out of Pennsylvania down here? And that was a bus coming out of Pennsylvania that went to see the mural on the wall. So if we get all this done, then I'm sure that not only is going to be a help for students and everybody else, but also be a big economic help for Anniston and all the cities around. Thank you very much.
My name is Pete Conroy. I work at Jacksonville State University, and I have now for over a decade. And Provost Turner and Dean Wade, I want to thank you both for supporting my small part in the development of Freedom Riders Park and this project. But beyond that, years ago, it was a legislator that had come to me and said, well, you know, we're finally going to bulldoze that damn place where the bus burned. And I kind of didn't even know what that meant until I refreshed my memory using a little bit of Google. And white spot in the road. This was referred to as the flame that ignited the civil rights movement. Bulldozed the Faulkner gas station where the KKK leader had arranged for this horrible day to have happened. You know, this, how many of you all raise your hands? How many of you saw the movie The Butler? Lee Daniels, The Butler. Netflix, tonight, go do it. The key scene in the film is the burning bus. This was such an historically important part of Alabama and the nation and really the world that we couldn't have let the bulldozers eliminate it from our minds. And so we immediately started thinking about a county park. Georgia, you were my first phone call, and you were way ahead of me as always. And we went out there. Local folks were okay. Had the land transferred from the state to the county, which made it a little bit easier to work with. And at that point, there was some additional opposition, but mostly support. Dr. Browder was among the first to help us understand the significance of what had happened in that place in Calhoun County, just outside of Anniston. And wow, it has come a really long way since those early days. I'm going to show some slides here, and let me, Tony, get the remote. I'll come right back. And as I described Freedom Riders Park, I'd very much like to mention a trip that I just took and just got back from Western Pennsylvania. And how many of you on 9/11 were familiar with Flight 93? Well, Flight 93 on the 10th and 11th was designated as the nation's newest national park. And as the dignitaries, as the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Governor of Pennsylvania, the Secretary of Interior, the Director of National Park Service, described how ordinary citizens, the 40 people who had been on that plane, through an act of heroism, bravery, changed the course of history. It dawned on me that their speech could have been the same speech that's going to be used someday if we ever have the opportunity to create Freedom Riders Park. It was ordinary people, whites and blacks, that just were ticked off enough to try to prove a point, and they knew how dangerous it was. And they did. They changed the course of history. And let's thank Bill Harbour right now. Bill wasn't alone, and Georgia equally was a pioneer. You heard about the Black Heritage Festival, the oldest Black Heritage Festival in the country, right here in Anniston, Alabama. It's going on 35 years. And it's an exciting time for where we are. Ferguson, there's so many things happening right now. We're kind of at the other end of the spectrum. We're in Anniston, Alabama, where the Freedom Riders changed everything. And remember, in Anniston, it was different. Birmingham went all KKK. Atlanta went all KKK. We had problems right here in Calhoun County. But when that bus burned, local folks decided to sign a petition. And within no time at all, they said enough was enough, and they integrated the library. Maybe a small step, but definitely not like the other communities at the time. Tony, where am I pointing this? You? Oh, thank you. There it was. That's the site. You could go down there today. This is right across from Downey's,
Mercantile store.
thank you, the mercantile store, where they sell plants and material. And I think it's a little bit nicer environment today. And then 7 miles away, remember the bus station were slashed. They drove, and just like Georgia and Bill had mentioned, the KKK leader, well, Mr. Forsyth, told his daughter, he said, honey, don't go to the store today. Something's going to happen. She's a 12-year-old little girl. Of course she went to the store. And she was looking out the window at that very scene. Right there on Highway 202, right where Bynum Leatherwood intersects. You know the spot. And again, the story that was so amazing to me is told by Hank Thomas in his basso profundo voice. He says, I could have stayed on the bus and certainly died. He says, I could have gotten off and been beaten. Opportunity to look at. And these are from the Birmingham Civil Rights Museum. And the homes in the background now are of interest to the National Park Service because they're still there. And we think we can get them. Yesterday we met with a number of the landowners, and everyone out there is very excited. Found out too that there was a Confederate battle flag hanging over Freedom Riders Park about 2 weeks ago. I drove by and it's like, oh geez, you think things are moving in the right direction, you see that. And I went home feeling bad until I found out that Mr. Emerson red flag. I truly believe you can do anything you want on your private property. Distasteful as it may have been, Mr. Emerson, he was the landlord. He kicked the guy out. And well, there's Hank a few days later.
He's on our board.
And Mr. Emerson's on our board, absolutely. And there he is now. And I'm showing you this photograph because this is a time-sensitive project. Mr. Thomas had heart failure about a month and a half ago. Compromised heart, lungs, and liver. We almost lost him. He's okay now. He's at home. He's resting. He's well. But kind of like World War II, we don't have a lot of time. Luckily, these guys are really, really healthy. But Mr. Thomas,
Getting old.
Mr. Thomas scared us. But years ago, this was the very first step. And the Omega Psi Phi's, an African-American service fraternity led by Willie Duncan, decided that they would not go with permission. They would go with forgiveness to put up a historic marker. Well, little did everyone know that so much would come from it. All of the community gathered around it. There's Georgia and Mr. Emerson, who had witnessed the fire in 1961. All the local elected officials came out and gave great speeches. There is the Omega Psi Phi's. It was truly a great day, but none of the elected officials knew that we were operating on forgiveness and not permission. Nevertheless, it's stuck. This is the daughter of one of the ABC 3340 photographers. And the caption, Freedom Riders who? Listen, if you poll kids today, Martin Luther King is a holiday. It's a day away from school. The significance of what has happened in the past is being lost, and that's why days like this are just so important to us. That's the moment that little girl learned what a Freedom Rider was. Here's Charles Person. He was on the other bus, and now on Noble Street, go by and read this stuff. Good restaurants in Anniston. Go eat there and read. And what Dr. Harbour said is absolutely the case. There's almost not a day now where people aren't going to that wide spot in the road on Highway 202. People from around the world literally are coming to see this. This is the mural that's downtown. And this is a group of international students working in collaboration with PBS. And they went to the wide spot in the road. Hey, this wide spot in the road needs a little bit more. And so we had the great opportunity, Dr. Harbour, Hank Thomas, the Freedom Riders, and I was a tag along, but I had the opportunity to reintroduce Janie and Hank Thomas before the cast of The Butler. And you recognize some of those folks right there. David Aiello in the middle. And now Terrence Howard was not there for this particular event, but prior to this event, how many of you know who Terrence Howard is? I mean, like, wake up. I was on the phone with Terrence Howard, and guy's the hottest guy in Hollywood. And I said, Terrence, excuse me, why is it you've been on the phone with me 30 minutes? And he said, Pete, had it not been for these Freedom Riders, I wouldn't be in a Hollywood trailer waiting for 100 others to tie my shoes. And it really kind of gave me the chills that we were on to something pretty big. But now, not only are these gentlemen, but several others interested in helping us when the time is right, and we're getting close to that time. Recently, when we did break ground out there, literally 1,000 people came to the groundbreaking. It was truly a beautiful day.
Other president.
Dr. Bill Meehan was there, and many, many others. And the kids were so cute. I mean, everything was just fantastic until 2 days later, the sign was burned to the ground. Kind of took the fun out of things. And luckily, we were proactive, and Dr. Broder taught me how to handle press releases. Instead of the headline, nationwide being "Rednecks in the South Do It Again," we were able to snag that and control the media. The headline was "Active Vandalism Unites Community." And again, Anniston was on the top. But the sign has been burned a couple of times, but this is our landscape. And from this point where the bus actually burned, kind of a hollowed ground, very much again like Flight 93. The plane crashed, and then there's a museum. This is where the bus burned, and then we'll have interpretive facilities all around. This right now is the contemporary design of what we're looking at. This is tens of millions of dollars. And to do this is complicated. So real quick, I can explain the oval on the top is an enclosed area because frankly, the traffic is loud. You don't want an 18-wheeler to mess up your moment concentrating on this important moment in history. And so that will block out the sound. There is a door for each individual who had been on the bus that day, and then a path for each individual. And so psychologically, you will have become connected to each of the individuals who had been on the bus, and then literally and figuratively, you take their path to the moment the bus burned. And it's a fairly powerful concept.
They'll be speaking if you want to.
Right, and you'll hear speakers as you walk through. One of Dr. Harbour's great ideas is we'll have an old bus that will be new insides, but it would be a 1960 Greyhound bus, and visitors can get on the bus at the actual bus station and then ride that 5 miles with interpretive panels, videos, and a curator or docent leading you there. And if any of you have been to the Atlanta Civil Rights Museum and put that headset on to hear what it had been like to have been at a lunch counter when you weren't wanted, it's hard. It's really hard to listen to that. And similarly, this bus ride, we'll make it pleasant, but we'll make it highly educational and effective.
Freedom Rider songs.
Georgia has Freedom Rider songs right here that are so powerful. That would be wonderful. Now, this is a recreated little Janie giving Hank the glass of water. And this is a young girl from Chocolaca and a JSU student right here. And these photographs were taken so that a double-sized bronze would be at the heart of this new park, representing, I guess, hope. A little white girl doing something she was told not to do. And Hank,
1961.
1961. And so we're moving in the right direction. Now, so here's where we are. The National Park Service, it was pie in the sky when we first started talking about this as a county park. But working with first Senator Shelby, Senator Sessions, Mike Rogers, the governor of the great state of Alabama, Del Marsh, Richard Lindsay, we now have this unprecedented coalition in support of this. And so the Park Service, they saw this broad support. City of Anniston, Calhoun County, you name it. Park Service says, okay, we'll pay to do what's called a reconnaissance survey. And that's the first thing that's done before the national park would move forward in the designation of an actual unit. They have to do the academic background research to justify that indeed is worthy of national attention. We're pretty certain we're going to be okay, but that survey is now triggered to start in about a month. And having met with the Washington offices just last week, We're working on this great deal. How often do you hear the Obama administration is working with the U.S. Senate? Well, in our case, maybe don't tell anyone, but it's happening. And so we're going to advocate for increased appropriations to civil rights parks throughout the nation in return for an accelerated reconnaissance survey, which would allow for us to possibly have this done within the next year. So no pun intended, but we're kind of the dog that caught the school bus, if you know what I mean. All of a sudden now it's happening, and it's happening quickly. With that, a little bit of background, Dr. Owen, would this be a time for some Q&A?
Go ahead and talk about it.
Yes, sir.
Give some of our board members. You think of it?
Sure, we have so many local board members, and Dr. Browder is on our advisory board, and Hank Thomas and Janie Forsyth McKinney are on our advisory board. And if you want to see something cool on YouTube, type in Emotional Reunion Oprah. Well, do you remember Oprah's very last TV show? You'd think she'd want to go out with a bang. Well, her choice was to invite people like this.
I was on Oprah show.
And they again reunited Hank and Janie on the Oprah show. But I mean, the eyes of the world are on what we're doing. And up until recent, we hadn't kind of known what to do with it. As I was out there yesterday, there was a gentleman taking photographs of the little sign in the wide spot of the road. So I go up to him and I say, "Hey, see you have New Mexico tags." And I said, "From New Mexico?" He says, "No, I'm from California. It's a rental." "Oh, okay. May I ask how you learned about this?" He goes, "Well, I'm a travel writer from Condé Nast and the New York Times." That was random. And so we really feel like things are happening right now. And but with this local support, especially from our own board, we're teed up maybe to become a unit of the National Park Service.
Who's on board member that was in a foreign country?
Oh, great story.
Trudy Mumford.
Trudy Munford.
Tell about that.
Mhm.
Tell us, that's a great story, Georgia.
Trudy Mumford is a native of Anniston, but she had lived worked 40 years in Buffalo, New York. She traveled a lot, and she was on a tour. I believe she was in Europe, and she went to
Auschwitz.
yeah, and she said, looking at, I think she was worried, looking at the Holocaust. And she said, well, she said something about Anniston. He said, "Anniston, Alabama, where the bus was burned?" And she said, "Oh, here I am way overseas now, and somebody asking me about the bus burned in Anniston."
And then the second part of that story was, well, what did they think about this back in Anniston? The German curator asked. And she said, well, there's some mixed emotions. And the German curator said, well, the same thing happened here in Auschwitz. No one wanted us to tell this story. And can you imagine there not being a Holocaust museum? Someone else chimed in and said, in South Africa, the Apartheid Museum, same story. There shouldn't be a museum. We don't want this to get out. Well, I think the cat's out of the bag. And it's a new time.
Yeah.
It was a lone lady who was a member of the Alabama Historic Commission. I went to the City Council of Anniston and asked about getting a marker for that. "Oh, no, let's forget it. That's ugly. We don't want to remember that." But it's history. So from that time on, we just worked until the Omegas came back to help me with it. But I went by myself to ask for a marker for this place.
You got good support from the mayor too.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, everyone. I know that there's probably a lot of questions that you all have, and we're going to take the time right now to just do a little question and answer. If you do have a question, as soon as we call on you, just make your way to a microphone just so everyone can hear. Yes.
I don't really have a question, but I am a professor in the sociology department. And whenever I saw this information about the Freedom Riders panel, I actually debated about whether or not I should bring my class here. And so after I decided to go ahead and bring the class, this student right here told me that during the summertime, he was in a production called The Burning, which is actually about the burning of the bus. And so I want him to talk a little bit about that production that he was in.
It's actually a few weeks ago, let's see, 3 weeks ago, I came back from New York, and a group of students from JSU and like actors from Georgia, we all united. And a former teacher who retired here, Miss Susan McCain, she created an original play called The Burning, and it represented the Freedom Riders and the struggles of the Anniston bus burning. Well, we went to New York to the Fringe Festival, the only Southeastern play out of the district, and we got top 8 out of 200 participants. So yes, it was a powerful message. Yes, it was such a powerful message. The audience members came to us, talked to us, some were in tears. They were just so moved by how the struggles, it was narrated by the eyes of two girls, one black and one white, and it showed the civil struggles, the hardships that we all faced. But at the end, we all came together because all that fight resulted in a good stance. And like, I guess the message was succeeded. So I just want to thank you guys for all the effort y'all put forth, because without that, like you said earlier, we wouldn't be here today. So just thank you so much. Thank you.
Another question? I think you had your hand up first. In the red shirt.
I just wanted to ask, like, what can we do as a student body to get more involved? Like, is there anything that we can do to help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would suggest possibly starting with Facebook and Freedom Riders Park. Like Freedom Riders Park, good way to keep in touch with what we're doing. And possibly if the right student government organization would want to invite Ms. Calhoun and I, we're local folks, and we would love to come and sit and talk with you. Georgia, if that's not too much to offer.
I'm not local. They woke me up early this morning, leave Atlanta, Georgia. Traffic heavy coming this way. And I'm retired, so I don't usually get up that early, but just for you.
Your question?
So I know Alabama's experiencing a deficit right now, and there's a big talk about closing down state parks. I guess this question's for you, Mr. Conroy. How does that affect with the Freedom Riders Park, since we're worried about our state parks getting closed, and how are they going to be able to allocate the money for the Freedom Riders Park? And is there a way like the local community could help raise that money to fill in the budget?
You're my new best friend. Let me step back a little bit to Little River Canyon National Park. Jacksonville State University similarly was very much involved in the creation of that. It's a preserve. You may know there's 22 flavors of national parks, and Little River Canyon is a preserve. Well, in 1992, we started to turn that into a national park. Jacksonville State built a nice big building up there. We now lease a portion of it to the National Park Service. And last year, again, the annual economic impact of that park was $16 million. Think about the tax revenue. So our philosophy is that this is more money in than it is money out. This is an investment. Now, at the same time, I'm thinking about Flight 93, 23 million went into that project through the federal government, and the remainder that took the project up to 60 million came in through private donations. And that's the way a project like this would have to work. It has to be a balance of public and private. And that's why Westinghouse has already come to the table. Alabama Power has already come to the table. I could go on with individuals. And I've heard that these people in Hollywood have money. I'm not sure. And Denzel Washington was also at the event. And I should have put the picture in of you getting the big Denzel hug. Yeah. There's money out there, and but we think this is an investment in what's called heritage tourism. And consider this: we're in between Atlanta and Birmingham. That's 10 million people.
Like Gladys Knight.
Oh yeah, mention that.
Additionally, in Hollywood, it was Gladys Knight. She's you don't see her in the movie, but a couple of songs that's in the movie. she put those together.
She'll be in Alabama next week.
And she'll be in Alabama next week.
Down at the casino in Wetumpka.
Oh, great. There we go. It's here for the lottery.
Any other questions?
I think everybody's hungry. They're ready to go eat.
I think so too. Well, if Tyler will come up here. You have one? Hold on. Yeah, that's okay.
It's not really a question, but it's a thank you to Mr. Conroy, Mr. Harbour, Ms. Calhoun. I thank you. Had it not been for your fight, your struggle, and everything that you went through, I wouldn't be able to stand here today to give my gratitude to you guys. In my 35 years of life, I've never set in on anything like this. And today I am honored to be able to hear your story. And I appreciate each and every one of you for your fight. So thank you.
If you would all just please give another round of applause to our panel. We'd like to thank you all for coming out today to this Constitution Day event. Please fill out the surveys before you leave, and I'm sure they'll be sticking around for just a minute. But have a great day, and go Gamecocks.